So the last few weeks, we have been talking about what we feel the mission statement for our church is, that one that's on the front of our bulletin. We have come to renewed life, to be rooted, to invite others, and to nurture relationships. We understand that the mission statement of the church is to go, and while we are going to baptize and teach all the things that God has taught us. We understand that, but focusing in, what is our turn by turn here in Chariton? It's we come to renewed life, to be rooted, to invite others, and to nurture relationships. I think Adam's got it up on the screen for you. Anyway, so we've been going through this, and I had talked the first week that we would be having, or that we would possibly be having membership classes if there's an interest in that. And so today I put a sign-up sheet out there. If anybody's interested in that, you just put your name, your phone number, and then I figured we'd do it on a Sunday. So whether Sunday morning, like during the Sunday school time would work best for you, or Sunday afternoon. And depending on who all is interested, we'll kind of work together to find a time that works for most people. I'll have that out for a couple weeks. So if you're watching online and you're not here this morning with us, there'll still be a couple weeks to sign up, or you can just reach out to me or someone else here. Anyway, that we've been talking, the last couple of weeks about our mission statement when we get into that membership class. And, even if you're a member and you just want to take that class, you can do that. Because we'll just kind of go through, what the Church of the Nazarene believes, and some of our faith statements, and things like that. So, even if you just want to retake it and go through that information again, it's a great class, and we will do that. It talks more about what the overall global Church of the Nazarene believes, and a lot of information, and so it'd be a good thing. So even if you are a member and you want to go through that again, go ahead and sign up. The more the merrier. Anyway, the first week we talked about how we come to this renewed life, right? We come to this renewed life. We give up our old life. We're dead to our old self. We are renewed, come to new life through Jesus. And so we talked briefly about that, and then we talked about being rooted, how the roots go down, and we come closer and closer in relationship with God, so much so that when someone says something that we realize isn't true, we would recognize that, right? And so we become rooted. And then last week we talked about inviting others into this. If no one talked about God, if no one talked about their relationship with God or their testimony or any of that, how would anybody know anything about God, right? So we're called to invite people. We're called to live out our lives in such a way that people recognize God working in our life, and we invite them into that relationship for that healing, for that restoration. And so this week, we're going to talk about our last word, our last bolded word in our mission statement, and that's to nurture relationships. So I want us to start out with a definition of what nurturing means. So if we use nurture as a verb, it's to care for or encourage the growth or development of. So to care for that. The noun is the process of caring for and encouraging the growth or development of someone or something, right? So it's like helping it grow, right? So we believe that we nurture this relationship. We're called to nurture relationships. We're called to nurture our relationship with God, right? Continue to grow, continue to be rooted. We feel like we're also called to nurture our relationships with other people, right? Christianity isn't, we don't become a Christian and then just live on an island all by ourselves, right? That's part of that inviting as well. One of the great ways that we have on our bulletin to nurture relationships is to pray, right? So that's why our back sheet has that orange on it, because we recognize that nurturing a relationship, part of that is through prayer. So that's one of the aspects. That's not the only one, but one of the ways we can do that. So we believe that the Bible in its entirety talks about nurturing our relationships with God, nurturing our relationships with others. Jesus said the greatest commandment is to love the Lord with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself, right? And that's like a nurturing kind of thing, and we recognize that. Part of loving is nurturing, right? So you nurture something that you love. We nurture our relationship with God because we love Him. We nurture our relationships with people because we love them. And love is not just like a romantic kind of, we're talking about love, the general sense. So we nurture those relationships because of love, right? And nurturing at its very nature is something that we naturally are inclined to do. When we talked a while back, right? God created out of nothing the world. God created ex nihilo, so out of nothing He created the earth, and He created the Garden of Eden, and He created all of the things. And He created man, and He created woman. And this is one of the verses out of Genesis 2. I'm going to put this up here so we can see this. Adam, go ahead. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it, to nurture it. At our very nature, we were created to nurture, right? Male and female. I know sometimes we go, well, women are more nurturers. No, really, at our very nature, we were all created to nurture. We reflect God and care for what God has created by nurturing it, right? When I think of nurturing, I think of a plant, right? I really did not think I had a green thumb. I did not think plants and I would get along well. But I am happy to say I have kept several plants alive for many years, and I am so happy about that. So when I think about nurturing, I think about that, and I think I've got to make sure that they have the right amount of water, right? You've got to make sure that they have the right amount of water. You've got to make sure that they're in the right size plant, that they're not becoming, that they're not becoming root bound, right? We had one plant, it was a spider plant. Sorry, Adam, I'm off on my notes, but we had this spider plant, and it just had baby spider plants all the time. And so eventually I got to the point where I was like, I think we need to put it in a different pot. And it was so root bound. And I was like, oh, it's going to die. We have ruined this. No, although it's not having as many babies in the larger pot, but it's still doing well. You've got to make sure when you have your plants, you've got to make sure that there's good lighting. You've got to make sure that the soil's moist. You got to have the right kind of soil, and that's all things that we have to research to know about plants, right? That's all things that we have to, because all plants are different, right? There needs to be some investigation that happens there. Now, even though I said the biblical text in and of itself talks about nurturing, right? Talks about nurturing and shows us how we nurture our relationship with God and how we nurture our relationship with others. There's this verse in Hebrews that I come to when I think about nurturing, and we're going to be in Hebrews chapter 10 today. Now, before we read this, we just came off of this sermon series about knowing the context, and so I want to give us the context in which this verse is given. So Hebrews is one of those books of the Bible that we may have guesses as to who wrote it, but we don't quite know for sure who wrote Hebrews. And we don't know which group of people this is written to, other than we know that it is people who are Christians who are Jewish, right? So we know the Christian Jewish population got this letter from someone, the author, right? And so they got this. They believe that Jesus was the Messiah. They were Jewish, and we recognize in reading Hebrews that this was written because they felt like the Jewish people were in danger. The Jewish people that this was written to were in danger of falling away from their faith. They were in danger of going back into their old ways, for not being Christian any longer. And so this was the reason why this letter was written. And so this is what it said to them in chapter 10. We're going to start in verse 23. This is one of my favorites, so we're going to put that in there too. Verse 23, chapter 10 in Hebrews. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see that day approaching. I love that verse in verse 23. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we may profess. Let us be so rooted in faith. Let us be so rooted in this hope that we profess that we don't veer off, right? We hold on to it unswervingly because we're so rooted. We don't waver because he who promised these things to us is faithful, right? We don't waver. We know what is true. We're so rooted. We have this relationship with God. And then it says in 24, let us consider. Now the word translated considered here is used one other time within the biblical text. And in that instance, it says consider Jesus. And here it says consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. So it says consider one another. And so I think that's really amazing that these two times that this specific word is used, that one time it's consider Jesus and the other time it's consider one another, right? And consider in this context, in this verse, this word that they translate into consider is to direct, means to direct your attention to. So when we think about this, it was that direct your attention to Jesus, direct your attention to each other. Direct your attention to one another, spurring one another on towards love and good deeds. Now, in this context, we can assume, based on the next verse, that he's speaking about spurring on other believers. I think we can expand that just a little bit too. How can we spur or provoke one another on towards love and good deeds, right? How can we do that? How can we help others how can we consider our fellow man and provoke them towards love and good deeds? I think it's a pretty simple answer. Maybe it's not. Maybe you guys have some good ones. But as I considered that question, how do we provoke people? How do we spur them on to good deeds? It's by showing the love of Jesus, right? It's by, in our own lives, soaking up so much, becoming rooted so deep, just soaking up so much about Jesus and God and all of this, that it just, and I'm going to use a word that Adam dislikes, it oozes. It oozes out of us. And people see that and go, oh, there's something. We have relationships with, or nurture those relationships. We spur one another on towards love and good deeds. And then it says, not give up, in verse 25, not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. As I said before, Christianity isn't lived out in individuality, right? Christianity isn't, we don't just become a Christian and then go live on an island all by ourselves. That's not the what God had wanted for us. This is called to be lived out in community, right? We are called to live out our faith in community, and in a community of believers, but also in the community, right? Live out our faith in the community. We are called to gather together, and we are called to nurture relationships, and we're called to nurture the relationships so that those show love and good deeds, and they spur each other on into love and good deeds. This is kind of this circular thing, right? We are healed, restored, all of this, and we talk about how God has worked in our lives. We continue to give our testimony on that, and then others see God working in our lives, and they see God directing us, and they go, oh, that's awesome. I have some healing I feel I need. And they come to God, and they have this healing and this restoration, and they grow in relationship with Him, and they ooze, right? There's this circular thing that comes, which we feel like God gave us this mission statement because it's circular, right? We come to renewed life, to be rooted, to invite, to nurture those who we invite, and to nurture relationships with so that they will come to renewed life, right? So that they can be rooted, so that they can invite, so that they can nurture relationships, right? So how does this all happen if it doesn't happen in community? How do we be the church if that isn't done in community? And like I said, not just community here. It's absolutely, I love that we gather together as a church, but we've got to be the church out there too, right? So I always try to give some kind of practical, what can we do in a sermon? I'm not always good at that, but I wanted to give us some practical ways to nurture, like some of these things that maybe we need reminded about every once in a while. I know I do, and I'm not the greatest at nurturing, and I try. And God's got to continue to work with me on that. So one of the tips on nurturing, I have a few of them that I thought of. One of them was know the needs, right? We talked about that before. When you have a plant, you have to research what it needs, right? What kind of sunlight it needs, how much water it needs, what kind of soil it needs, all these things. So in order to nurture relationships, we have to know the needs, right? And that involves getting out there and getting to know people. One thing I love is being here for the care closet and understanding some of those needs, right? Understanding, getting to know, some of the people that are here and understanding those needs. Another tip we have in nurturing is being intentional and spending times, right? We should set time aside each day to nurture our relationship with God, right? We set time aside each day to read the Bible or to do our devotional, to pray. We set aside time to nurture that relationship. Sometimes we got to set aside time to nurture relationships with others, right? Yep. Okay. That's all I had. I thought there was another point I was going to make for that one. But we need to set aside time and be intentional in spending that time with other people, right? And maybe it takes us a little bit outside our comfort zone. But if God's directing us there, then I think we need to go there. Another thing is to communicate. I feel like communication is one of those things that is a downfall to a lot of relationships, that there's not clear communication that happens. To talk about nurturing our relationship with God, we communicate with Him through prayer, through, I don't know, I kind of talk to Him throughout the day, and just, but one of the things is we've got to be honest, right? God already knows what's going on, and so we got to be honest, and we've got to be honest with the people around us too, and communicate that, and see how they're doing, honestly. I don't know if you've got people in your life that do this, but I have people in my life that'll go, "How are you doing?" And they, Diane King, for instance, was one of those people that she would go, "How are you doing?" And I would go, "Oh, I'm doing good. And she'd go, "Okay, well now what's the real answer?" Right? Like, we've got to be intentional in saying that, and understand, and like getting to know people, and getting to know what their needs are, getting to know what is going on in their life. That's part of the way that we nurture these relationships. As I said, Christianity doesn't happen on an island. And we believe that these things that we've talked about in the last couple of weeks, this renewed life, this rooted, inviting, nurture, they all naturally flow from one to the other. And this is the path. I'll scoot over. I heard it go again. This is the path that we feel God has us on. This is the mission that God has for us. We believe here in Chariton. Now, God may eventually change that, but this is what we're focusing on now. And may we never forget that. I pray that we take this in our hearts, and that we remember this through when we speak to others, when whatever our actions may be, whatever our thoughts may be towards others. I pray that we remember this, that we're called to nurture, that we're called to be rooted, that we're called to invite. It's hard to invite and to nurture relationships with people if you have poor feelings with them, right? The mission Jesus gave us is to go, and while we are going, to make disciples and to baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and to teach them all that Jesus has commanded you. And we feel like that is played out here in Chariton, to be rooted, to invite, and to nurture. That's how we feel God has directed us here in Chariton. I know you guys desire a restoration here in Chariton as much as I desire restoration. We desire as a church for lives to be changed, right? We desire that as a church. And it's not because we want lives changed so that they'll come, so that our numbers will grow, and we just honestly want lives to be changed, right? That's our desire. We desire for chains to be broken, right? For people to experience that freedom that they have in Christ. And we know that there's only one way that this true healing, this sozo healing, this salvation healing can happen. And we desire as a church for this to continue forward, right? And for restoration to happen here in Chariton. And so that's part of the reason why through this we're talking about membership classes. If you say, yeah, this is how I feel God is leading us and I want to partake in that, there's that. There's other ways to partake in that too, and that's, I am just really back feeding into that. Are you guys hearing that, or is it just up here with me? Yeah, okay. I'll try to stand over here so I'm not right by the speaker, because that's what they tell me as I get close to the speaker, and then it does that. Anyway, I pray that all decisions that we make in this church all deal with that. We keep our mission statement in mind as we move forward. And I pray that God continues to bring us along as a church and continues to root us and continues to guide us and continues to show us what it is that He has for us, because I know that we desire restoration here in Chariton. And like I said before, it's not just we want to grow the church. I mean, it's great to have numbers in church because that means that there's changed lives, right? Honestly, but we desire this because of our relationship with God, and we desire others to have that freedom and that peace that comes with that, right? So we are going to close this morning with the song, Lord, I Need You, because as much as we try to do things, right? We try to nurture relationships, we try to invite, this doesn't happen just through our actions, right? We understand that this isn't just an us thing, that we've got to follow the guidance of what God has for us. So let's close out with, Lord, I need you.